somebody is knocking. I can get you one. Thank you, Seth. As we mentioned last week, some say that the idea that Hagar runs away is connected to Abraham. In other words, Abraham represents freedom. Abraham preaches the oneness of God and how everybody is equal before God. So once a person takes that philosophy, they're affected by Abraham and they want freedom. So it's not just that she now has a new role in the home. She is now considered a wife, and therefore she doesn't want to recognize Sarah's superiority, but also it's also a spiritual change within her belief system that comes from coming close to Abraham. So that was what we discussed last week. That theme is going to come up again, because as we will see in verse 7, an angel appears to Hagar and says, you go back to Abraham's home. The question is why? Why should he go back to Abraham's home? Okay, so we'll see. But, 1 second, excuse me. Thank you. Oh, so what we're going to read now, I think we need a bigger table here. We have enough. You can take my coat off that chair. That's fine. John, you got plenty of chairs. You can just put my coat on the floor. It's fine.
Here, sit here. Sit here. There's no one here.
Yeah. The only problem is that maybe the book numbers, maybe the page numbers may be a little bit different on that one.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
We are Genesis 16, verse 7. Okay, so we're going to look at that. Thank God we already have 3 different versions. We have the one on the screen, we have the stone, and we have the kahat. So that should be exciting. Okay, so we're going to share the screen and see the angel. What is the angel going to do? The angel wants her to go back. Verse 7. And an angel of the Lord found her by a water fountain in the desert, by the fountain on the road to Shur. I don't know why they translate fountain. My guess is the article translates spring. Yeah, spring. So there's a spring of water that is on the road to Shur. Which one? Everyone knows where it is. And those, when you're traveling through the desert, the spring, everyone knows where the spring is. So if Hagar is running away from Abraham's home in the south of Israel, she's probably going back to Egypt, because she was an Egyptian woman. She's probably going back to Egypt. So she's going south. She stops at where you would stop, not at Starbucks, but at the spring. And what happens at the spring, an angel comes to her. And the angel asks, and he said, Hagar, Sarai's servant, where are you coming from? And where are you going to? And she said, from before Sarai, my mistress, I am fleeing. Okay. Why does the angel, so now, let's read a few verses, then we'll go back and analyze. The conversation continues. Verse 9, and the angel of the Lord said to her, return to your mistress and allow yourself to be afflicted under her hands. And the angel of the Lord said to her, I will greatly multiply your seed, and it will not be counted for abundance. And the angel of the Lord said to her, behold, you will conceive and bear a son, and you shall name him Yishmael, for the Lord has heard your affliction. Yishmael is 2 words. Yishma, we know Shema is here, listen, like Shema Yisrael, but here it's Yishmael, God will listen, or heard. Yishma will hear, and for the Lord has heard your affliction. And verse 12 is interesting. And he will be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be upon all, and everyone's hand upon him. And before all his brothers, he will dwell. And that is the angel. That's the end of the angel's conversation. Verse 13 says, and she, who's she? Hagar. She called the name of the Lord who has spoken to her. You are the God of seeing, because she because she said, have I seen him here? Also after I have seen. It's not clear what that verse means, but it's a beautiful verse, as we will see. Okay, so what do we have from all of this? First of all, what is interesting about the beginning of verse 8, 9, 10, and 11, which is unusual in dialogue in the Torah? So if anybody wants to guess, you can guess. Otherwise, I'll spill the beans. What's unusual is that every verse begins, and the angel of the Lord said to her. Not just and the angel of the Lord said to her. right? If you want to write dialogue, it should have just said, the angel is giving a speech, right? The angel is saying verse 9, 10, 11, and 12, okay? So verse 8, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. But 8 is a conversation. 8, he asks a question, the angel asks a question, and Hagar answers. Okay, so 8, it makes sense why it would say, and he said, Vayomer, he said. Okay, but verse 9, 10, 11, and 9, 10, and 11 is one series, it's one speech from the angel. So why does it keep saying, and the angel of the Lord said to her, and the angel of the Lord said to her? If you're going to write a book and you're going to write dialogue, and if I'm saying one series of ideas, you're not going to say, and Menachem said to her once, twice, 3 times. It's writing it too many times. Go ahead, Steve.
Possibly there was more than one angel. That's what this version has.
Oh, so that's one answer. One answer is more than one angel. But why? But that leads to the question of, why do you need more than one angel? Okay, good. So it's more than one angel. The question is, why do you need more than one angel? Okay, so we're getting somewhere. But you see, the question that version has asked, it's really bothered by my question, which is, why does it say Vayomer La, and he said to her so many times?
Because each and adds more.
Very good.
More emphasis.
Very good.
To what they're trying to get her to do.
Very good. The angel doesn't want to talk to her. Why not? I don't know. He doesn't want to talk to her. Whatever. Why would a person merit revelation? They don't necessarily deserving. So you get only what you're deserving. So what that Abarbanel, I'm quoting from that Abarbanel. What that Abarbanel says, he says something very interesting. He says, each message is enough to convince her to go back. The angel thinks that after verse 8, she'll go home. That fails. She's not interested. So you know what he does? He tries again. It's not a different. It's not a continuation. It's a new conversation. That didn't work. Here, I'll try again. Tells her 9, and he says, and the angel of the Lord tells her. That's a message for itself. 9 itself should get her to go home. Doesn't work. Okay, we'll try again. 10, and the angel of the Lord tells her. 10 is its own message. She doesn't want to go back. Finally, 11 and 12. 11 and 12 is the message that gets her to go home. So now we have to unpack and see what exactly the angel is saying in each one of these. 8, 9, 10, 11. The angel is telling her 4 different messages, as we will see in a moment. The angel is telling her 4 different messages, each one by itself. The angel thinks he can persuade her with. She is not persuaded by the first 3, only by the 4th. That's why the Medrash says that it's 4 different angels, because we know that something about angels. We know that angels, we'll see it in the next parsha, Vayera, angels cannot multitask.
Does she believe she's punishing
Sarah
because the boy is going to be a wild?
We'll get to that. I don't think she's punishing Sarah. She's protecting her freedom and the freedom of her son. She doesn't want to live in an environment where there's somebody else in charge. Because even though she was a maidservant, now that she becomes a wife, she tastes the idea of freedom. What was I saying? I'm saying that.
How did she become a wife? She's still a maidservant.
No, if you look back, it says, verse 3 says, so Sarah, Abraham's wife, took Hagar, the Egyptian, her maidservant, after 10 years of Abraham's dwelling in the land of Canaan, and gave her to Abraham, her husband, to him as a wife. But the verse says, Leisha. So within that culture, within polygamy, within a polygamous culture, she is still the chief wife, or call it what you want, the matriarch, call it what you want. But the verse does say, we discussed this last week, the verse says black on white. He did not give her he wasn't like a concubine. There were other ways.
So Sarah has the pole position in terms of being the premier wife.
Yes.
But she's got second in command status.
Correct.
And she's like exercising that.
No, she's not exercising second in command. If she would exercise second in command, everything would be fine. But Hagar says, I'm the one that got pregnant, so I'm more righteous than you. So I'm the one with the child. So I'm the first in command.
There's no maliciousness at all in her, you don't think?
We discussed it last week. We discussed this last. I don't want to.
She's like one of those people who goes into an apartment and becomes a squatter, and then
That's right.
She has the rights of a
That's right. I don't want to redo this because we did it last week. I don't want to redo this, but to the extent that the verse does say, the verse we discussed, the verse does say clearly, Sarah gives her as a wife to Abraham, not as a maidservant, not as a concubine, not as there's all different terms that you can use. Shifcha, Ama, there's all different words. Pilegesh, here it says wife. You can't get away from that. Yes.
In verse 4, is the word wife or mistress?
Verse 4. It says Vatekal Gvirta, her mistress. In other words, the relationship between Hagar and Sarai is Hagar's mistress. but Sarai is Abraham's wife. It's complicated.
She's both.
It's
She's
both.
a mistress and
She's
a
both.
wife and-
She's a no. Sarai is Hagar's mistress, but Hagar is Abraham's wife. So that's an interesting family dynamic. I don't recommend this. Don't do it unless you have to. Well, now you can't do it anyway. But
So she started out as just basically an assistant to Sarah.
no, a
A
maidservant.
maidservant.
Maid
Okay,
servant.
someone taking care of the household.
Correct.
A maid.
And then Sarah, we discussed.
Hagar, the girl.
Ladies and gentlemen, I don't want to take up too much time. We did this last week, but in short, Sarah, the one, if you want to defend your grandmother Sarah, which is what I want to do, Sarah does a great kindness to Hagar. She not only gives her to Abraham as a concubine, which she could have done, and a concubine means that she doesn't have really any marital rights, but instead Sarai gives her to Abraham as a wife, and in return, Hagar mistreats Sarah. So that's a problem. So that's why Sarah says, look, everything is fine, but I am the mistress of the home. I am the primary wife of Abraham. And if you're not willing to acknowledge that, then you got to get out of here.
Well, my question
So she
is,
runs away.
When Sarah gave Hagar the right to be a wife of Abraham.
Yes.
Is that something that she can actually cause
Yes.
to happen?
Yes.
In other words, Abraham didn't take her as a wife. Abraham just had relations with her, but Sarah said, okay,
Yes.
you can be married to my husband.
Correct.
And it's like her saying that, it's official, it's official.
Correct. How do I know? Because that's what the verse says. The verse says Abraham is passive. It's a very interesting verse. We discussed this last week as well. If you read verse 3, you will see. So Sarai, Abraham's wife, took Hagar, the Egyptian, her maidservant, after 10 years of Abraham's dwelling in the land, and gave her to Abraham. The verb she took is a verb about marriage in the Torah. Ki yikach ish isha, when man will take a woman. Take, the word yikach, to take, is a synonym for marriage. Usually you would expect always in the Torah, we know in the Jewish law, the man gives the wife the ring, right? So the man is active in the marriage. Here it says Sarah took. Sarah's executes the idea because Sarah is the mistress and Hagar is her servant, her maidservant. So it's in Sarah's power to do, and that's exactly what she does.
Why
So
would she bother with such a thing? Why not just let Abraham have this concubine? Why is she giving in like she's giving rights to this person?
Good question.
This is a maid.
maybe that's what you're gonna do.
It says that
Giving maid rights.
Maybe that's
Leah did the same thing.
okay. That's a good question. It's a wonderful question. We have to move forward. But I just want to say one point. It's part of the kindness of Sarah. If you're going to bring someone into your house, if you're going to have her give a child, right, produce a child for your husband, you don't want to take advantage. You want to also give freedom in that sense. Go ahead.
I think it increases the status of Ishmael.
Right. He becomes now the son of, not only the son of Abraham, but also the son of a free woman or a wife. Right. Yeah.
So he gave strength to actually the union.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this is a wonderful conversation. But we have to, we did this last week, a wonderful conversation. We want to now go back and see. I was going to say, angels don't multitask. Next week, God sends 3 angels, next parsha, beginning of the next parsha, God says 3 angels to Abraham's tent. Why 3 angels? Because there are 3 separate messages. And we know that, why do you need 3 messages? So Rashi already told us, we'll discuss it when we get there, that angels are one-dimensional, right? Every angel, if there's an angel to heal, they heal. Angel to destroy Sodom, they destroy Sodom. Every angel is one-dimensional, not like a human being, which is multidimensional and can do multiple things at once. So it's possible that the interpretation that you're quoting from that book, the Kahas book, the Medrash says that it's 4 different angels, right? It's 4 different angels. It's because there's 4 different messages. And 4 different messages have to be done through 4 different angels. The Rashi actually said, they stole it, the Kahas translation stole it from Rashi. Rashi says, every time it says, every saying, verse 8, 9, 10, there was a different angel. Therefore it says, and the angel of the Lord told her, because it's a different angel. But I'm focusing not so much on, was it 1 angel or 4 angels, which according to Rashi was 4 angels. But the question is, what is the angel telling her, and what's the new message? Every statement carries forth a new message to entice her, so to speak, to go back. She doesn't want to go back. Eventually she'll go back, but it's actually interesting to see what does not entice her and what does entice her. That's actually interesting. So we'll go there. We'll start unpacking.
Just
Yes.
a question about, aren't most angelic encounters that we encounter in the Chumash multi-angel
Yes.
as opposed to singular?
Yes, but multi-angel, but every angel is doing something else. For example, we read 2 angels going to Sodom. So you need one to save Lot and his family, and one to destroy.
Understood,
Yeah.
but usually it's more than one angel.
Correct.
On a mission.
Right.
With different tasks.
Correct. But over here, it's actually, even if there are 4 angels, it seems like each one is sent separately. Because the angel, it says in the singular, and the angel of God in the singular told her, verse 8, and the angel of God told her, verse 9, and the angel of God told her, verse 10. So the point of the matter is that it's not like they came in a group. Anyway, it seems like they're coming separate. Each one's got one shot. Like it's like you want to convince your kid to do something. So first mom tries, then dad tries, then the grandmother tries. Everyone's trying their own way to convince them. That's what it seems like here. And eventually she's persuaded. But it's fascinating to see what quote unquote bribes she does not care about, and what does it says. You know what? If that's what it is, I'm happy to go back. Go ahead.
Do you know why I disagree with that?
That's fine.
Okay, because looking at the times there are multiple angels,
Yeah.
every single time, whether it be the Humash, whether it be Daniel, when Gabriel and Michael show up, okay, they always denote the numerical number of angels.
Right.
Every time there's numerous angels, it's
Right.
the numbers always noted.
Right, but here it's in the singular. It doesn't say one angel, but it says it in the singular. Vayomer la malach, and the angel said to her, not the angels. So now, yeah.
So that's that. But like so normally it says when there's multiple.
Yes.
It always mentions that.
Yeah, you're going to see the Vayera. You'll see 3 angels. To Lot, you'll see 2. Correct. Okay, let's make some progress here because otherwise we'll just be here forever.
Is that such a bad thing?
No.
Is that such a bad thing?
I'm anxious to get back to Genesis in about 12 years. So if we don't finish, we can't start again. So we have to finish, I don't know, 12. Last time it took us, I think, 10 or 11 years to finish. So this year, maybe it'll take us 13 years.
A single letter in the Torah.
Correct.
There's so much meaning, we could go study here for several years.
Correct.
Probably not penetrated, so.
Correct. Well, not it will penetrate, but there's still more.
Not understand it fully.
Correct. Okay, let's read verse.
She only saw one angel.
One at a time. According to Rashi, there's 4 angels here. Okay.
It
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Verse 8 is a beautiful verse. You know why verse 8 is so beautiful? Because we'll read the verse. And he said, Hagar, Sarai's servant, where are you coming from? And where are you going to? And she said, from Sarai, my mistress, I am fleeing. Now, you could read this verse as informational. The angel wants to know, where are you coming from? The problem with that reading is the angel knows where she's coming from. So why are you asking a question that you know the answer to? If you're an angel, you should know. So
Does she know does the angel know what's going on inside or only?
he doesn't ask that. He says, where are you coming from?
Yeah,
Maybe
but
it's about
saying
where are you
where
coming from?
coming from in your thought?
Okay, so hang on to that thought. So let's deal with Rashi. Rashi says, well, it's not surprising because even God himself asks questions that he knows the answer to just to start a conversation.
Yeah.
What's the best example? The best example is after the first, not the best, but it's also the best, but it's also the first. After the sin of the tree of knowledge, Adam and Eve hear the voice of God, so they hide because they realize that they're naked. So God tells Adam, Ayeka, where are you? Ayeka, where are you? Rashi says God doesn't know where Adam is. So Rashi says, of course he knows where he is, but he's doing it to start a conversation. And there are other such examples in the Bible. So Rashi says here, the angel knows where she's coming from, right? Of course, well, Rashi doesn't say it here. Rashi does say it here. From where are you coming from? He knew where she's from, but it's only opening up a conversation. So that's Rashi's interpretation. But there are other interpretations, and the other interpretations are beautiful. Why? Because the other interpretations say, this is not an informational question. He's not asking her, where are you coming from? What he's telling her is, how could you leave? How could you ignore where you're coming from? So it's a rhetorical question, but it's not a question for information. He says, you're coming from Abraham's home. Where are you going? You're going to Pharaoh, back to Egypt. He says, well, how could you not contemplate where are you coming from and where you're going to? In other words, he wants you to pay attention and realize that from running away from Abraham's home, she's losing the privilege of being in Abraham's home. She says, pay attention. Where are you coming from? Where are you going? And what's also interesting is that subtly he reminds her that she is indeed Sarai's servant. What's at stake here? It's not just saying Hagar, Sarai's servant. It's not just the title. The problem why Hagar is running away is because Hagar doesn't want to submit to Sarai at that point. So she says, so Hagar feels like I'm in charge. I had a child, so that's God's way of saying I'm pregnant. So that's God's way of saying that I'm the primary wife. So here the angel, when he says, he's saying two things. First of all, he says, Sarah, Hagar, you are Sarah's servant. And by the way, what's interesting is that she acknowledges that in verse 8 as well. Hagar says, from before Sarah, my mistress, I am fleeting. She doesn't say I'm fleeting from before Sarah. She says my mistress. So already over here, the angel already reminds her of her proper position in the
One
home.
gets the feeling that she is very confused and taken by the whole thing is a bit of a.
Could be. Let's read further and you'll see, I want to say that she knows exactly what she wants. And that's why she's not persuaded by the first three. She's persuaded by the fourth, because she knows exactly what she wants and she wants freedom. And therefore the angel says, Abraham is a good house. It's a wonderful house. Doesn't do it for her. So the commentaries say, Barbanel and others say, just that first question, where are you coming from and where are you going to?
I think it's the opposite.
Okay, let me make the point. Let me show the whole conversation. Then we open up the floor. So the question here is, the question here is, where are you coming from? Where are you going? This contrast that. Don't you realize that when you're leaving Abraham's home, you're going to the environment of Egypt, it's not comparable. You shouldn't be leaving because you should pay attention. Sometimes you don't appreciate what you have until you run away.
Is an angel care about trying to instruct
Good question.
this maidservant
Good question.
about what the right thing to do?
Good
is?
question.
As if an angel is concerned about bettering this person.
Good question.
What makes this person even worthy that an angel should be speaking to her to try to make her any better if she's acting like a very sort of controlling maidservant trying to usurp control of the home? Why is she
Good
getting
question.
this instruction?
Good question.
Why don't you just leave her to the desert? And
Good
who
question.
cares
She's
about
not
talking
trying to
her?
be mean.
Good question.
I'm telling
Well,
you,
I'm asking the question.
and I'm.
Good question. I think the answer is, my opinion. First of all, I don't know the answer, but what I suspect that part of it is also, I would look in two places. I would look for the benefit of Hagar. Why she's so important, we'll get to it in a minute. But more importantly, probably for the benefit of the child. He's Abraham's child. If Hagar runs away to Egypt, where's Abraham's child going to grow up?
In Egypt.
In Egypt. What's going on in Egypt? The pagan culture. She runs away from Abraham. She's also running away from Abraham's influence. And not only for herself, but also for her child.
So she maybe for the sake of the children that the angel is speaking to her.
At least, that's certainly. It could be we also care about her. Because especially if you read later, the sages say that Abraham remarries her, Hagar. And by the way, the Medrash says, how does Hagar, Egyptian maidservant, end up with the house of Abraham? So according to the Medrash, it's a very interesting Medrash. The Medrash says she's the daughter of Pharaoh, or a princess in Egypt. When Abraham and Sarah go down to Egypt and they leave, she says, I'd rather be a maidservant in Abraham's home than a princess in the home of Pharaoh. That is according to the Medrash. In other words, she is influenced spiritually by Abraham and his teachings. So if that's the way you read the Medrash, and that's consistent with the Medrash says later that after Sarah passes away, the verse says Abraham goes and marries a woman named Keturah. Keturah comes from the word Ketoret, incense. And the Medrash says, Rashi quotes that Medrash, the Medrash says, Keturah is really Hagar. And the reason why we name her Keturah, because her deeds were as beautiful as the Ketoret, as the incense in the temple. In other words, I could make an argument that she's not just an ordinary Egyptian maidservant.
She was told to leave the house. Sarah said, get out of the house. She told Abraham, get this person out of the house. So we're acting as if this person is leaving of her own volition.
No, she ran away. That's a different story. You're confusing two stories. There's the story that Abraham sends her away after she gives birth to Ishmael. That's the next parsha. This is when she's still pregnant. Here, she runs away. And the angel says, don't run away. The angel says, go back. Why should I go back? So he says, verse 8, don't you see, where are you coming from and where are you going? That itself is not really a question of information. Give me a second, Steve. It's not just a question of information. Where on the map are you coming from and where on the map are you going to? He's an angel. He knows that. What he's saying is, don't you realize the problem that you're leaving Abraham's tent and you're going back to a place of Egypt, a place of pagan idols? And that itself is the question. That doesn't work. So she says, that's wonderful, she says, but she says, I'm running away from Sarah, my mistress. So the angel says, we'll see what the angel says in 9, but go ahead, Steve, go ahead.
Well, I'm not sure that marriage and love. I'm not sure marriage implies love in the time of the Torah. Like in modern times, yes. Like love, there's a song, love and marriage go together like a horse and a carriage. But that's
Horses
modern
and carriages
culture.
don't always go together, but
I
okay,
mean,
yeah.
In ancient times, love and marriage are totally separate things. And marriage is perhaps for inheritance, perhaps for reasons of the of the family, the either matriarchal or patriarchal family, the entire family. But the fact that he marries her does not imply that he loves her.
I'm not going to disagree. In other words, but the bottom line is that he wants that relationship for whatever reason. That relationship is important to him. He pursues that relationship.
We're
So
missing the whole thing, in my view. It's a spiritual thing. She's sick inside. She's confused. It even says God sees people who are suffering. She calls out to God. God talks to her and he sees people suffering. And that's the answer. That's why she's willing to go back.
okay, so let's see.
But I think we're
I think
missing.
also you gotta
That's it.
consider the issue of power too, because as soon as a person feels like they're second in command, they feel they're slighted, they feel they're second best.
That-
And this is an issue, okay, where we know exists in the world. A lot of people say, I don't want to be second in command. I need to be the chief or nothing. Some people are willing to take second in command status. Here's a case where this maidservant did not want to take that second in command status. She had that streak of independence and the desire to be the chief wife of Abraham. And this threw her for a loop, and she said, okay, I'm going to leave this place. But ultimately, the angels tried to talk to her.
Right,
They say,
so that's
"Child," to bring her back.
So let's pick up what the angel is saying. So the first thing the angel says, and the angel of the Lord said to her, return to your mistress and allow yourself to be afflicted under her hands. In other words, recognize your position. She doesn't want to go back. She doesn't move. She doesn't respond. She's just ignoring him. Okay, so what does the angel try? So the angel says like this, you know what? Here's what we're going to do. Verse 10, and the angel of the Lord said to her, I will greatly multiply your seed, and it will not be counted for abundance. Okay, that's a deal. Trade-off. You go back, and if you go back, I'll give you a blessing that you're first of all, you'll have a child, and your child won't be counted for abundance. Is that a good deal? I would say not a bad deal. She doesn't take the deal. That itself, again, if you're following this interpretation that the angel has to keep talking to her, is because verse 10 is not persuasive enough, right? So it says your descendants will be a great nation. Who wouldn't take that deal? She's not taking the deal. Until when? So let's read verse 11. So verse 11 and 12, really verse 11 and 12 is one continuation because it doesn't say, and the angel of the Lord said to her before 12. So 11 and 12 is a continuation. So he tries again. And the angel of the Lord said to her, behold, you will conceive and bear a son, and you shall name him Yishmael, for the Lord has heard your affliction. Okay, so that's the first thing. You don't want to be afflicted? You don't want to be afflicted? Don't worry, nothing wrong with being afflicted. God is with the afflicted. Okay, here is the thing. He will be a wild donkey of a man. We're going to discuss this verse. His hand will be upon all, and everyone's hand upon him, and before all his brothers he will dwell. This seals the deal. This gets her to come back. What does this verse mean? So I just want to put it out there. There's two ways to read this verse. One, that it's derogatory, it's negative for Yishmael. That's the conventional way of reading it. Most people read that at first glance. However, most of the commentaries say you cannot read this negatively. You must find a positive interpretation for this. Why? Because if it's negative, how did that persuade her to go back? Right? So the angel says that's the final thing. The angel says, oh, go back. And if you go back, he's actually going to be, his son is going to be a wild donkey of a man. Oh, what a compliment, right? Imagine you go to PTA and they say, your child, oh, he's a wild donkey of a man. Say, wonderful.
If they go back.
Oh, so let's talk about that. Let's talk about that. So the bottom line is, before we get to the big picture, we have to define what this verse is saying. So, hu yeh paradam, and he will be a wild donkey of a man. This is so conventionally speaking, many people read this as just a statement. this is going to be a wild man. His hand will be upon all and everyone's hand upon him. Rashi reads this, for example, Yodei Bakol, his hand is upon everybody. Rashi says this is negative. He's going to be robbing everybody. He'll be wild man. He lives in the desert. He doesn't live in civilization. And therefore he's a highway robber. He robs everybody. And the hand of everybody is in him. Rashi says everybody is fighting with him. Nevertheless, before all his brothers he will dwell, he's going to be numerous. So the conventional interpretation is that the angel says, go back, you're going to have a child, you'll name him Yishmael, and what's going to be with this child? He's going to be a wild Indian. So, I don't mean to, I just said it as a term, nothing against the Indians. He's going to be a wild ass of a man. He's going to be running around. He's robbing everybody. Everybody's robbing him, but he's going to be living everywhere because he's going to be so numerous. That's the conventional interpretation. The problem with this interpretation is if that's the report card and that's the prediction that the angel is getting, that the angel is giving her, why would she go back? I mean, this is not good news. And the angel is trying to get her to go back. So he should be giving her good news. So one interpretation is what Seth alluded to. What the angel is saying, according to one interpretation, Abravanel's interpretation, Abravanel gives a few, but this is the one I remember. If you don't go back, he's going to be a wild man. If you don't take him to a place where he'll be educated by Abraham, you may have a child, but what's the child going to look like? He'll be a wild man. He's going to be robbing everybody. Everyone's going to be fighting with him. You don't want that. Go back to Abraham. That is one interpretation. And that keeps the wild donkey of a man, it keeps it negative. But it's not that he's telling her, this is what your child will be. It's he's telling her, this is what your child will be if he doesn't go back to Abraham. And that says, then she says she's a good mother. And she says, I'd rather, so she accepts the submitting to Sarai for the price of having a child that would not turn out to be a wild ass of a
That
man.
alleviated her inner confusion and her inner.
She's afraid of the consequences of what this angel's saying, and the fear is driving her back to the house of Abraham.
Okay, so but what's the angel saying? The angel is saying, according to this interpretation, wild man is bad, and if you don't go back, this bad thing will happen. There are other interpretations. So Vicky has a question, we'll take the question, and then we'll give the other interpretations, because the other interpretations flip everything on its head, where Para Adam is good, wild ass of a man is good, and she says, if you go back, it will be good. So everything is going to flip in a second. Go ahead, Vicky.
Well, I was just wondering if she, I mean, I'm not questioning that she's a good mother, but maybe her ideal future for her child is to be like over everybody. I don't know about the other translations, but in Art Scroll it says, over all his brothers he will dwell, which is not a bad future for a child in her opinion, probably. So she wouldn't mind, I mean, given the culture she grew up in, maybe to be a wild ass and, wild ass, that's how it's not me. That's how
some parents, they get the report card and it says your kid can't sit straight and your kid is the most wild kid in the class. Some parents are happy. So that's a possibility. That's a possibility. Certainly a possibility.
I just wonder how it's translated, that's an accurate translation, but Art Scroll says that. It's a very strong language, but first of all, it's translated like wild ass, and then it says, over all his brothers shall he dwell.
On the face of all his brothers he will dwell. It doesn't say over. Al Panei, on the face of could be next to in biblical Hebrew. It means he'll live everywhere. And just to be populous, Rashi says it means he'll be populous. Just to be populous, the angel already said that in verse 10. That didn't seem to work. So what are we left with? We're left with as follows. We're left with the first opinion was again that para Adam, wild man, is negative, and wild man is negative, and he says if you don't go back to wild ass of a man is negative, and if you don't go back, your child will be a wild ass of a man. If you go back to Abraham will help tame him. Okay, that's one interpretation. Then there's another interpretation. The other interpretation is it's the opposite. Wild ass of a man is actually a positive in Hagar's mind, and maybe even objectively. And if you do go back to Abraham, he will have that. What does wild ass of a man mean? And according to this interpretation, wild ass of a man means that the person does not want to submit to the laws of civilization. He doesn't want to stop at red lights. He doesn't want to pay property taxes. So what does he do? He goes out and lives in the desert, right? He wants to have a life of freedom. Now, think about this for a second. What does the mother want? The mother says, I don't want to submit to Sarai. So I'm running away from Abraham's home and I'm going to go back to my homeland, to Egypt. What the angel is telling her at the end, you don't understand. If you stay in Abraham's home and you accept the position of Sarai, what's going to happen is you're going to have a great nation. But not just a great nation. You'll have a great nation that will truly understand freedom. And the freedom will be internalized within your children. And in that sense, the wild ass of a man, the fact that they don't want to live in civilization is a positive, objectively speaking. And it's also something that she understood and she wanted for her children. She didn't want her children to be enslaved. But the key here is that this is influenced by Abraham. It's because of Abraham's influence. And the commentaries say, it's very interesting. They say that if you want to think about Abraham's two sons, Ishmael and Isaac, and we're descendants of Isaac, the ideas of freedom come from the idea of the unity of God. God is one. There's no divisions within God. There's no divisions in people as they stand before God. So the commentaries say, at least some of them, give me just a second, Steve, that if you think about historically, the Arabs, descendants of Ishmael, were actually the ones who developed the philosophical notions of the unity of God and brought it to new heights. And a lot of the ideas of the unity of God that Maimonides teaches, he actually got from Muslim scholars. In other words, this idea that the angel tells Hagar that your son is actually going to internalize the ideas of freedom from Abraham, and therefore he will not be civilized. Therefore, he won't want to live in civilization, to live in the desert, and he'll appreciate freedom, actually comes into fruition in the sense that Ishmael's children internalize the oneness of Hashem, and therefore, as a result, they internalize the ideas of freedom. We, however, the Jews have that, but we also have something else, and this is what Ishmael didn't have. We have not just freedom, because Abraham's legacy is two-pronged. It's freedom coming from the one God, but it's also to do justice. And to do justice requires discipline. And nothing in this verse, nothing in the verse of the promise of Abraham to Ishmael, nothing in this verse does it say anything about discipline. It says about freedom. Be a wild man. You won't have to discipline yourself. So because we are influenced by Abraham, as we'll see later, also by Sarah, and Sarah represents discipline. And discipline would mean to create a civilization that is based on justice. And that's a different skill. And that's what we have. And that's what we were very good at. But in some ways, we have to recognize that some of Ishmael's descendants contributed to the ideas of belief in the singularity of God and the true philosophical understanding of the singularity of God, which then becomes, if God is one, then everybody is free before God, because there are no divisions within God, so there's no divisions within people. If that's that idea, that's a contribution that actually comes to Judaism through Ishmael's descendants. So that's very interesting. And it also helps the entire picture, because the entire picture is what she wants is freedom. So when the angel says you can have a lot of children, that doesn't persuade her. When the angel says, how could you leave Abraham's home? That doesn't persuade her. But when the angel says, you're going to go back, but your children will experience freedom and experience them never always rebel against subjugation to any people, and they'd rather live in the desert than to live in civilization, which represents acceptance of rules and regulations. Your children are not going to want to do that. So she, as a lover of freedom, because she is influenced by Abraham, she says, if that's the price to pay, then I'm willing to go back. Go ahead, Steve.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yet another thought we can take from this, and this is in addition to, not instead of, but another thought we can take from this is that her actions will change history. I mean, like in modern science, we had the butterfly effect.
Yeah.
Like if a butterfly flaps its wings 3,001 times instead of 3,000 times, that will change all of history.
Yes.
So here, one lesson we can take from this is that her actions will change.
Yes, yes. But again, in what way? What will be the result? And what persuades her? So yes, I agree that her action of going back actually, so where are you more free? Are you more free if you run back to Egypt, which is a society that's all about hierarchy? And you may have personal freedom, but your children will certainly not understand the true concepts of freedom. Or are you more free if you go back to Abraham's home and you recognize your position as second in command, the way Jonathan articulated? And in that sense, but the benefit you'll get is your children will be influenced by Abraham and freedom will be internalized.
I have
Go
two
ahead.
comments.
Yes.
Sorry, what is your first name?
Jonathan.
Jonathan, you had said why, I think you asked the question, why did the angel? First of all, correct me if I'm wrong, Rabbi, angels are not autonomous.
Right.
So anything an angel does, the angel does because he's directed to do so by Hashem.
But the question is why? The question is why does Hashem want Hagar back at Abraham's house?
So I just want
Yeah,
to
yes,
establish
yes.
the lack of
Correct,
autonomy
correct,
of the
yes.
angel.
My question has to do with that there's a God directs angels, okay? Angels do not operate
Yes.
in a vacuum.
I
Every
agree.
single angel is under the command of God.
Correct.
Okay.
No
Yes.
dispute.
Yes.
No dispute. So
Yes.
my question has to do with why in the world would God care so much about this person who's already acting in a way that's contrary to Sarah's wishes by basically trying to usurp control of the home? In other words, God usually, in most instances, cares about tzaddikim, righteous people who are doing his bidding. He doesn't really care as much about unrighteous people who basically are abrogating God's will, and he lets them kind of go by whatever nature happens, just like whatever happens to animals is not directly controlled
Right.
by God to such a great degree of providence as what happens to righteous people. When someone like Hagar is basically going against Sarah's wishes and saying, I'm going to take control of this home, my question is, what makes it such an important thing to get Hagar back to the home? The
Great.
answer that Rabbi gave, which is a number of them, is perhaps it has to do with the fact that Sarah has a child that is innocent and hasn't been born yet. And if that child were to be subjected to the vagaries of the desert, it could die.
I want to say also that Hagar internalizes this message, and she goes back to Abraham's home, and she lives there for at least another 13, 14, probably at least another 15 years. And the next time she's quote unquote thrown out, well, not quote unquote, she's thrown out, is not a result of her behavior. It's a result of Yishmael's behavior. That Yishmael is now interfering with Isaac. So in other words, whatever the angel told her, which is in verse what verse did he say? He says, Shuvi al gvirtech, go back to your mistress and accept her dominance. Verse 9, however they translated it over here. Verse 9, an angel of Hashem said to her, return to your mistress and submit yourself to her domination. She accepts it, and she doesn't go, and she goes back, but she doesn't go back and continue to quote, I don't know what the word is, she sort of quote bother Sarah, even though for 13 years she's the one with the child, and Sarah does not have a child, but she listened to the angel. So she's not just troublemaker. In other words, she ran away because she internalized ideas of freedom, and then she goes back because the angel told her to go back. And she goes back, and at this point, she is now respectful to Sarah. So that's a good thing. The fact that later she's sent away is nothing to do with her. It has to do with the child. So there's just an interesting point.
I just have one further.
Yes.
Comment. A wild ass. An ass is a beast of burden.
Okay.
Okay. So I think
That's a civilized one.
I'm
That's a.
I'm just looking for positive attributes
Yeah.
in that description. And to me, it says that he's capable of carrying burdens,
Yeah.
and his hands being on other people alludes to perhaps him being a leader,
Right.
an alpha male,
Yeah.
who can assist others with their burdens.
Right. So I'd say two things. First of all, wild ass of a burden, wild ass of a man. I don't know why they write ass, a donkey. I don't know why they write that. In other words, pere would mean untamed. But in Hebrew, pere could mean anything. It could be a wild animal. It could be a wild fruit, right? Pere means wild. So you're saying this donkey, specifically a donkey, because a donkey could carry a burden. Could be that's right, but I don't know why they got that translation, because para just means, I think it means the opposite. He doesn't want to submit to burden. Para means even if para is just untamed. But I would say that Abarbanel says that Yodeh Bakol, his hand is in everybody and everyone's hand is within him. I told you Rashi says that's negative. Others say it's positive. It means he's doing business with everybody. Doesn't have to be negative. Again, according to the second interpretation, this actually verse 12 is actually the verse that persuades her to go back. Your child is going to be wild. He's not going to submit to anybody, and he's going to be successful. In what sense? He's interacting with everybody. His hand is in everybody. Everyone's hand is within him. The negative way to read it is he's stealing from everybody and everyone's fighting him. That's a negative way of reading it. But that's not the only way of reading it. The other people read it in the positive. He's interacting with everybody. He's doing commerce with everybody.
You know, the deeper meaning of everything in the Torah has meaning, and yet everything is the way it's supposed to be. So what do you think Hashem's reason is for having caused the energy of an Ishmael to come into the world? And you were starting to touch on that subject in reference to that the Muslim religion had started to identify the unity of God through the independent spirit of that thinking process, and that maybe that ended up tangentially coming into Judaism through those seekers after, the unity of God. But, in terms of this independent Ishmael energy that really kind of typifies, what Hagar was doing as far as wanting to have that independent spirit, leaving, when she had felt that she was second in command and so on and so forth. What do you think the bigger picture is for the ultimate messianic era, that this energy of Ishmael had to exist in the world? It almost seems like it's frustrating on one level for us, because it's for Sarah it must have been very difficult. She had this person.
Okay, so let me jump in. Yeah. And I would say as follows. I say, first of all, I don't know. In other words, I'm not sure why God does it, so I don't know. If I had to guess, I think it's related to what we're going to say in the next chapter. The next chapter is a whole story where Abraham's name is changed. And God says, Abraham, you'll be a Av Hamon Goyim, a father of many nations. In other words, Judaism is unique in the sense that it understands that the Jewish people and the Jewish way of life is not the only way necessarily to connect to God. In other words, for the Jewish people, the way we connect to God is the Jewish way. But Abraham has a message that is a universal message. And therefore, he's the father of many nations, including Ishmael. In other words, every nation has a place within the grand plan of creation. And it's not like most religions would say, we have the formula, we have the potion that you do. If you follow our potion, you connect to God and you are saved in some way or another. And if not, you are you're doomed, right? Eternally damned. Everyone's saying this. Every religion says the same story. What does Judaism say? Judaism says, no, Abraham is the father of many nations. And there's one specific nation, which is the nation of the Jewish people, which have a specific and unique role. But having said that, that doesn't take away from everybody having an important space within the Abrahamic message of one God. And not everybody is supposed to do the same thing. And not everyone needs the discipline required for Isaac's life to be able to cultivate what the Jewish people are doing. You need not only freedom, you need freedom also. That's why freedom is a very important theme in the Torah. The whole Torah, every mitzvah in the Torah almost goes back to the foundational idea of the Exodus of Egypt. So freedom is a very important role within Judaism, because we are also heirs of Abraham. But freedom is not the only thing. It's also commitment. It's also justice. It's also discipline. It's also commitment to create a society built on freedom, not just run around the Arabian desert and have fun, which is also a nice thing to do. Don't get me wrong, because Abraham says it's a wonderful thing. So the short answer to Jonathan's question is, it's not one-dimensional. There's the Jewish way of life of connecting to God and living Abraham's legacy, but there are also many other ways, and they're all legitimate and all good. For the Jewish people, we have our own.
She's asking a question I wonder about. Could I have seen even here after having seen? So she's wondering. So
it's a very interesting phenomenon. She is a very interesting phenomenon. She represents, how would you think that a maidservant like Hagar would experience revelation? One angel or four angels or four times. It's obviously a very important, a very significant experience. Mm-hmm. Now, if you look at the Bible and you see other people who have an experience, they literally freak out, right? The famous example that the commentaries point out is that the birth of Samson, before the birth of Samson, there's Samson's father, Manoach, and his wife, they experience this angel. They don't know he's an angel, he's a human being. Turns out they realize he's an angel. The guy freaks out. The guy says, now we're going to die because we saw this great revelation. Now we're going to die. In the book of Judges, now we're going to die. And the woman says, no, we're not going to die, because if God wanted us to die, he wouldn't tell us this whole message. He wouldn't bother coming. The bottom line is, it's a very extraordinary experience of revelation. So how come, the Medrash asks, how come here she doesn't seem, she seems pretty fine? This is introduction to your point. So the Medrash says, well, you know why? Because she has been living in Abraham's house. In Abraham's house, people experience revelation. People are into prophecy. So it's not surprising for her. It's not the first time it happened. What is the first time that happened is that it happened after she left Abraham's home, and that's what she's surprised. And now read verse 13. And she called the name of Hashem who spoke to her, you are the God of vision. For she said, could I have seen even here after having seen? What does that verse mean? Could I see God when I left Abraham's house after I have seen God in Abraham's house? In Abraham's house, it's not surprising, because I'm not experiencing revelation because of my own merit. I'm just in the environment of Abraham's house.
Angels were there all the time.
Yes, and everybody there is involved in prophecy. In ancient Israel, there was a whole school of meditation. You would meditate to experience prophecy, and sometimes you would experience it, sometimes you wouldn't. Without getting into all of this, people would meditate to get prophecy. And in Abraham's house, this was a normal occurrence. And that's what the Medrash says. The Medrash says, look how the maidservant in Abraham's house is not at all bothered by seeing an angel, whereas the Israelites, Manoach and his wife, they're totally overwhelmed and they're afraid they're going to die. So obviously, it's not the first time it happened. What is the first time that it happened is she says, now I could see God even after I left Abraham's house. Oh, that's already, now she's excited. Or that's the
So
news.
maybe that's why she went back.
Well, maybe. In any case, one more. I want to try to finish the chapter. Al Cain, verse 13 is an interesting verse. Therefore, the well. Oh, bad translation. Oh my God. Therefore, the well was called the well of the living one, appearing to me. It is between Kadesh and Bered. You want to go find it? You can go find it. What is the exact translation? Al Cain Kara. Therefore, doesn't say Nikra. Nikra means called, was called. Al Cain Kara means therefore he called. Who's he? Therefore he called the well. Al Cain Kara la Be'er. Therefore he called the well of the living one appearing to me. Who is the he? That is the question.
Hashem. She's speaking to Hashem in this paragraph. Okay,
the problem is it would say Kara, she called. It doesn't say, oh, you're saying Hashem called.
She called the name of Hashem who spoke to her.
Vatikra, now that's clear. Verse 13. She called the name of Hashem who spoke to her. You are the God of vision. Yes, that's she called. Correct. 13.
She said, then she asked the question.
Now verse 14. Therefore the well was called, but it doesn't say the well was called. It says, therefore he called the well. Al Cain Kara la Be'er. Therefore he called the well of the living vision. The living one.
Well, this one says, therefore the well was called.
I'm telling you that despite what that one says, it's not accurate.
Okay.
Right? Al Cain Kara la Be'er. Therefore he called the well. That's what I'm telling you. Not that I'm this tremendous scholar, but it's just simple Hebrew. Al Cain Kara la Be'er. Therefore he called the bear. The question is who called? So there are different interpretations. One interpretation is who's the he? I don't know. Maybe Abraham. She came home. She must have told him the story. She said, what are you doing here? I thought you were running away. Oh, I had a vision. I was at the well. I had a vision. God came to me. Okay, so let's call the well the vision of the living one who appeared to me.
This says the everlasting angel appeared to me at the well.
You're reading which verse are you reading?
Number 14. I'm reading I guess it's the commentary.
Oh, no, the commentary is just going to distract.
Okay.
We want to know what the verse says.
Okay.
So the verse says he called. Who's the he? He is the Abraham. That's one interpretation. Another interpretation, and this explains why the verse would say the well was called. Another interpretation is that when it says he called without saying who does it mean? It means everybody called. In other words, this was a very important mission, message for everybody. Everyone heard the story of the angel coming to Hagar and everybody therefore referred to this well. So when you say he, but you don't say who, it could either mean a specific person or it could mean everybody. So the he called is the singular that refers to the collective. In biblical Hebrew, you can say singular for a collective. So you could say horse for many horses. You could say man for many people. So you could say he called for everybody called. Why did everybody call? Why did everybody call this well? What was so interesting about this experience? The angel told Hagar to go home. She got a text message that it's time to go home. That was so earth-shattering about this experience? No. What the earth-shattering about this experience, and I think Seth alluded to, is that the story of this well is really that Hashem heard her pain. And that's the name of the well. What is Be'er Lachai Ro'i? This, here it's translated, the well of the living one appearing to me. But that's not exactly what it says. If you look at the Hebrew, in poetic Hebrew, the prefixes and suffixes are not spelled out. Be'er, river. Lachai, the translating here is to the living one. Ro'i, who sees me, who appears to me. The message, the universal message could be this well, this account is a testament that God sees the pain of the afflicted. And God sees, notices this, right? Especially in many philosophies in the ancient world and now as well, is that God is too great to be concerned with the specific pain or specific needs of an individual, right? God, even if God is a prime mover, but he doesn't care about what's going on in this ant colony.
Which religion teaches that?
Well, they're not just, first of all, philosophy. Aristotle, that's philosophy, the philosophy of Aristotle.
Well, that's not religion, that's a philosophy.
Even religions.
Aristotle it cannot be defined as a religion. He was a Greek philosopher.
Even many religions believe that God is concerned with the collective. So the collective well-being of the humanity, right? But me as an individual, that is, first of all, it's not so clear. It's not so clear that everybody believes this. I would tell you that even within Judaism, not everybody agrees with this notion. That's, that there's.
God is so far away,
Yeah.
so distant.
To say that
God
there's.
doesn't. It's missing throughout the text.
That's not Judaism, though. We know that God's concerned with every aspect of the universe, and he monitors every aspect of the universe. So that we can't say that because if someone's in pain,
I'm very happy.
You can't say that God's so.
Jonathan, let me interrupt you for a second. Let me interrupt you for a second, only because I have to go and I have to shut down the Zoom and I have to go in 1 minute. But I just want to say two things. First of all, it's very, very good that you feel that way. And the reason why you feel that way is because, especially once the Hasidic movement was introduced, that philosophy within Judaism becomes more dominant, that there is divine specific providence. I'll tell you right now that there are great Jewish people, including Maimonides and the Guide to the Perplexed, that did not believe that there's divine specific providence to everybody. They believe that God is specifically concerned with the righteous. But with the masses, they didn't believe that God has specific providence. Other people disagree. Other people say Maimonides wrote it in the Guide to the Perplexed because he's talking to the Aristotelians, he's talking to the Greek philosophers.
Maimonides wasn't necessarily the
let me finish. I agree with you, but I'm just saying that many religions believe that there's no specific providence. Even certain people, even Maimonides writes that. And the fact that you are so adamant and saying, no, what are you talking about? God really cares about me as an individual. I say, I agree with you, but that's also influenced by the Kabbalistic and Hasidic movement.
And also with Judaism, because the question was during the Holocaust was, here's the main question. The main question was what?
Where was God?
Was God?
Okay, let me just close this. Let me just finish the conversation because we have to go and everybody is waiting so patiently on the machine here. I just want to say, but whatever the case is, even if Jonathan says I'm sitting in 2021 and for me this is obvious, this was not obvious in the people living at the well, at the spring between Bared and Kadesh. And when they heard the story and they said, what did the angels say? Yishmael, God heard. And what did the angels say? God heard your pain, right? So it's not just God has a plan for you asked the question, why does God care? So it's not just, my answer was, well, the benefit of the child, well, the benefit of Hagar. The angel said, and this is at least part of the correct answer, so I'm going to reintroduce this. The angel gave a reason why God cares, because God cares about the affliction of the individual. That is big news. That's why whoever passed that, they say, wow, look at this well. This is the well where we see that God sees. God sees the individual pain. That is news. And that's why, coming back, why doesn't it say who called it? If you say Abraham called it, okay, Abraham understands this. But if you say everybody referred to the well as what? The well of the God, the living God who sees. That's the takeaway of the story. Takeaway of the story is, I don't care who you are, I don't care where you're going, where you're coming from. If you're in pain, God sees.
It
Now,
says
why
so
God
in our prayers.
Yeah, it says so in our
lifts
prayers.
us up from the dunghill and
Correct.
the lowest of the low and makes nobles out of us.
Correct. So the good news is that this is a very provocative conversation, and we could sit here all day and talking about it. The bad news is that unfortunately we have to run, and the good news is that we hopefully will resume next
But
week
now
in good
we're all
health.
lifted up high.
Yes.
from this terrific
Yes.
God
success.
saw her pain.
Have a
So
wonderful
if-
day,
if
everybody.
God saw her pain, how come my bodies not